Mihi and then pass to our chair. So join with me, I'm going to go slow. Here we go. Whakataka te hau ki te uru. Whakataka te hau ki te tonga. Kia mā kina ki uta. Kia mā tara ki tai. E hi ake ana te atakura. E tiu, e huka. E hauhu, tihe mauri ora. Cease the winds from the west, cease the winds from the south. Let the breeze blow over the land, let the breeze blow over the ocean. Let the red-tipped dawn come with a sharpened ear, a touch of frost, a promise of a glorious day. And we all appreciate that it's a metaphor not just about the weather and the elements and the characteristics, but a metaphor for our business i te rangi nei. Hoi anō ko e ngā, kei ngā nui kei ngā rahi, e ngā mana e ngā reo. E noho nei kai runga ki tēnei tēpu hei kaunihira, hei wahanga, tēnei te mihi ki o koutou hoki maira ki te tēpu. Acknowledging those of our regional council, we welcome you back to the table in this year. Whakawhiti atu ke e nā e noho kai muri nei, kei ngā mana reo e muri nei, tā koe mihi ki o koutou, haere mai ki tēnei wahanga e tuwherahia, mā tēnei kaunihira, mā tēnei komiti. Acknowledging those who sit in behind for this session that is open as part of Regional Planning Committee. Tēnei te mihi ki o koutou, tēnā koutou, huri no tēnā tātou. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Patty. Thank you very much. Now, do we have any notices? No notices. Apologies. We have apologies from Matu, Joanella, Karanga and Tania.
I'll move apologies be accepted.
How are we going to get on? We got 4 Tana Whenua not present.
Do we have a quorum?
Yes, we do.
Yes, we do.
Proceed.
Yep.
And you have moved.
Move the apologies be accepted.
And seconder? Oh,
Right. I'll second.
Api. All those in favour?
Aye.
Aye. Conflict of interest declarations, only referring, of course, to the meeting today. Do we have any? None. Therefore, we'll move on. Confirmation of the minutes of the last meeting on the 12th of December. You all have a copy, and hopefully you've all read them. For accuracy, are there any comments regarding accuracy in these minutes? There are none. Therefore, do we have a mover to approve these minutes?
Yep.
Jenny, Toto, thank you very much. All those in favour? Aye.
Yeah, we'll give it a nice.
Follow-ups from the previous meeting. Tom, is there anything that we should be thinking about here? Any comments on the follow-ups? Paul?
Thank you, Chair. Just through you, I suppose, to the media team or the communications team, the discussion number 5 about the request for an update on unconsented feedlots. I think that's a really good news story. I think it's one that we could perhaps look at making some sort of public comment about it, apart from just a minor thing in the agenda about follow-ups, because it demonstrates that as a council we are actually listening to what the people have asked us to do, and we're actually doing something about it. I know that we are restricted by the rules that are in place at the moment under the Regional Resource Management Plan, but that's up for review. It's next year, isn't it, James? So that gives us an opportunity to deal with this issue even further.
So, Councillor, it's funny you should say that. We had a conversation with the Principal Comms Advisor yesterday about getting on the front foot of telling what we're doing around compliance on feedlots and using it as an opportunity going into winter to remind landowners of their obligations, as well as communicating to the wider public. So great minds think alike.
Occasionally.
Yes, you can, Tora.
I think the original question was in relation, arose as a question from Mr. Wilson. Regards to a feedlot up at Raupunga, but I was unable to be here to answer the question. So I think the first point of inquiry should be our staff themselves, see whether or not there is an uncompliant activity. From my understanding, our feedlot up in Raupunga didn't need a resource consent, although we have applied for one just to appease perception, you might say. But I would like to invite you all up there to have a look at it, because it is a very high-tech operation, and we're very conscious about the environment, and we will not be utilising it in a way that some of those feedlots you see on TV. The invitation is there. Come up and have a look, rather than speculate.
You've got a couple of your girls don't like it.
It's all right for them to say yes, but you know, you are the regulators.
Okay, thanks, Tori. Any other follow-ups? That's a very good one, though, because we are the ones who have put pressure on the government to fix this mess. They are the ones who have to fix it. They listen to us, they've talked to their staff, and they're going to do something about it. And we're reliant on them doing something about it. So we've been proactive there.
So through you, Chair.
Yeah, who's...
Yassine, sorry. Just in terms of item 1, I just want to just note that in terms of the tank plan change has gone out for pre-notification consultation. We have received a request from one of the TAs to extend that by 2 weeks. And so that's under active consideration. I think that's possibly a decision we can make, probably take at a staff level, but that's just making you aware of that. I think we had given a 6-week window for feedback, and so we're just going to consider that, and then we'll inform all parties.
Thank you, Tom. For someone to move the follow-ups are accepted. Paul, thank you. Peter will second. All those in favour? Aye.
Aye.
And we will move to one item's not on the agenda. We have, you want one? Okay.
Can I have an update when the Hawkesbury Regional Council is going to draft a variation on the regional plan to give effect to the NESPF in terms of forestry?
Oh, that's here. Yep. So you've...
So I can take that. Yep. Same packet.
Yeah.
Oh, you had one too? Okay.
Oh, resource management.
Resource management.
That's the short version of it.
Okay. Any other...
The NES application of the
Paul?
NES.
Thank you, Chief. I have 2. One is the Hawkesbury Regional Council Youth Council, and the other is Eels at Tukituki.
What was that last piece, Paul?
Eels.
Any others?
Total, yeah.
Okay. I have one. I'll just quickly report. I did a report on the Maori Committee on Waitangi Day celebrations. Okay. Right, decision items. We'll move straight to probably the most important one for a while. Item 6, potential Tukituki plan change. You all would have read the paper. Is Gavin going to talk to us?
No, I am. Tom will read it.
Tom, can you just précis, because I think everyone's read this thoroughly and everyone's probably got their position here and they need to ask questions.
I will.
Chair, I'm wondering, can this be deferred into our next meeting, because this this report hasn't gone past the Tuki task force at all?
Chair, I'm surprised to hear that comment, because there's always been pressure on to get things moving from Central Hawke's Bay.
Could I just suggest to you, Chair, the answer to this is what's being suggested here by Councillor Hewitt is a procedural motion. She's effectively asking the Council to defer the paper. Now, that being a procedural motion, there should be a mover and a second and be determined at that point. No discussion. If the council decides not to defer it, well, it goes on to debate it.
Okay, I think that's probably right. Debbie, do you want to move this as a procedural matter that we defer this paper?
Yes.
You'll move that. Okay, do we have a seconder for that?
Yep.
Alan will second that. And Jenny's in your camp and you can speak to it.
Thank you. This paper's really unfortunate because at the very first hurdle with any sort of plan change, we can't expect to get a unanimous support across the board, but we've tried really hard as a task force to actually come from a position where we are joined as a community, and we haven't had the opportunity to take where we've landed at this point in time back to the task force. Our next meeting's on the 12th of March to actually see where the community want to go with it. It's really important that the forest and bird opposition is acknowledged and that they're part of the solution there. So as a consequence of this, Mayor Alex and I have written to the National Office. I've got a copy of our letter here, which I'll table, and that's an invitation to Tom Kay to come and join us at our next meeting and actually just get a feel for actually community decision making. So we're doing our absolute best, but it's a real shame to be even considering at the first hurdle that we walk away. So I just think out of respect to the process and the people that are involved at this point, we should be going via them.
Alan?
I concur with those comments.
Okay, other speakers? Jenny?
Just to further to what Deb said, I have intended to talk with Ngāti Kangani Iwi to actually get them, and I did mention it at the meeting before Christmas, to get them at the table of the task force and to appear. But I haven't had the time because Christmas happened to do that. So that's why I agree with the request.
Before we have other speakers, can I just ask some questions? So 12th of March is the task force. 3rd of April is next RPC. So just everyone get that in context. That's when it would be deferred to. Is that, you would be happy with that? Is that the deferral? To the 3rd of...
Whatever the next meeting is.
Yeah.
The RPC has moved, hasn't it?
17th.
It's the 17th.
Yeah, it's now the 17th.
Oh, my diary, old-fashioned as it is, doesn't keep up, eh?
Is it?
17. So then it's the 17th. So just everyone put in context. Other speakers? Mr. Chair. Oh, I never see him. Not that dark. Are you standing up?
Yeah, in agreeing with councillors' recommendation. We're not talking about this summer, of course, we're talking about 2 summers, because this summer, with Saturday, the drought will be over. The other thing is, in terms of kahungunu, from the Tai Whenua chair, I would just like to express his concern that a letter from Nikki, submission from Nikki went out without any consultation with the tamatea Tai Whenua. If they did that to Wairoa, the roof would fall in.
Tautoko.
Other speakers? Paul?
Thank you, Chair. If we delay this paper until the 17th of April, what chance I suppose this is a question for Tom, what chance do you think there would be of getting any plan change through for the summer of 2019-20?
Next to 0.
A follow-up question, please, Mr. Chair, to Tom. Would you say that ratio is pretty consistent today as much as it is in April? Are we close to next to 0 currently? And will that shift by April?
I'm just conscious that we're in a discussion around a procedural issue, and the question is effectively asking me to dive into the paper. I think for those of you who have read the paper, obviously staff are of the view that it's incredibly tight.
But Tom, the councillors need to, I know what you're saying is right, but councillors do, and Tai Whenua do need to understand the implications of this the best they can. So if it's a month, they do need to understand it. Any other questions, discussion? Tom?
We outlined a very clear process for considering the viability of a plan change. We had 60-some folks did find the time, despite the holidays, to comply with our request, to make their views known on it. What has become clear in that process is that there is significant opposition to making that plan change, which is not going to go away by April or June or October or next April. So it may be a bitter pill to swallow, but let's get on with swallowing it.
The question here, though, which hasn't been, I know people like to have consultation, go round and talk until they'll talk the legs off an iron pot. But what I'm actually more concerned about is that if we have a delay in this which is being sought, what is going to be the consequences for the processes further down the track? It seems to me that we are up against it now anyway, and so if we have a further delay, are we going to make this impossible to do anything with? The second thing is, if there's over mind to accept, because I get in the paper, there's doubts from the staff about the effectiveness and so on there, if the council's of mind to take that up and say, well, we no longer agree with this, are we not better to make that decision sooner, so people get on with their lives, or later? I'm just...
I think one of the questions in my mind is Jenny's point, given that a lot of this was done during the Christmas holidays, have the people had time to talk to each other about this and to talk to the different protagonists? I would have thought they had, but we're being told today they haven't. And does another month really matter?
2 months, Chair.
2 months. It's 2 months, but the other thing is that I would have thought the views of people were pretty clear. It's not the first time we've had a discussion about this. We've been up and down this track now. This is the third time we've been on this track. So I would ask you, what is new and fresh that's going to come as a consequence of this to make the discussion different? Or are we going to go around and around and around the same material and doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result as what? I'll leave it there.
Mr. Chairman, I think it's a shame to effectively marginalise the Tukituki task force. It's not fair on that community. It's not fair on that group, and they just deserve the courtesy of having this information put in front of them, and for their invitation to forest and bird principles to be responded to. Time is not of the essence.
It is. It is. Of course it is. Of course it is the essence.
Chair, sorry.
Sorry, Tom.
I was just going to make a comment, but I don't want to cut across. Was a councillor, a committee member have their hand up?
No, you had your hand up.
I just want to... I want to just be clear, in case we don't have this discussion, that I think there's an important some commentary that needs to be made around forest and bird, and I think I would like, as a courtesy to forest and bird, to make a kind of a statement around that, because they're not the only party in opposition, and I just want to be careful that this debate doesn't identify just one party. As it was pointed out, we had a submission from other authorities and agencies that were opposed to this.
Before we go on, Tom, I looked at that list and I was going to go through, but I didn't give it the time to do it. Of the submissions, how many, I thought it would have been useful, opposed or for. Do you have that number?
It's in the paper.
Well, I didn't see it in the paper.
Paragraph 16, Chair. So summary of responses, there's a table.
For the table?
Yeah, so you've got 18 in support, 22 in opposing, and then you've got a number of others of different positions.
Okay, I was just trying to support Tom's position that it wasn't just Forest and Bird, we shouldn't just demonise them.
Absolutely.
So carry on, please.
Look, the only point I was going to make, and we touched on it in the paper prior to December, and we at that time we shared the letter that we received from Forest and Bird that quickly followed the Tukituki Task Force letter, which expressed their dissatisfaction with the process and what Forest and Bird felt were effectively missteps in that process. And so that did come to this committee to the extent, on the 12th of December, to the extent to how well that was debated or not, you know, I can't really recollect. I haven't gone over the tapes, but you know, I feel that we hopefully made an attempt to sort of rectify some of the concerns there. Subsequent to that, when the consultation or effectively the feedback document went out, we've had further correspondence from Forest and Bird who felt that our process had not necessarily helped the situation, but had potentially exacerbated the situation. I think in the defence of staff, I think there's different perspectives on that, points of view. And a senior planner and myself did speak with members of the National Office on the telephone to go through that, and so we have. So I just for this committee and for this discussion, I just do want to acknowledge that Forest and Bird have been dissatisfied with the process. They probably do find themselves in a position where they're slightly at odds with perhaps, I think, the Fish and Game and EDS position is, you know, we're not entirely happy about this, but we're going to, you know, we're sort of happy for the community aspect to sort of stay in. So I think they're sort of qualified support as opposed to qualified opposition. But I just think it is important for we've got local Forest and Bird here, and we've probably potentially got national Forest and Bird, you know, watching in, or who may watch in again later. I just want to be transparent, acknowledge that they have had issues with the process. We've had discussions. I don't think we can necessarily say that those issues are resolved, but they're ongoing.
Thank you, Tom, for that clarification. Does anyone want any more clarification from Tom on this, or are we ready to vote on this? Does anyone else wish to speak? I'm interested in other councillors' views. Peter, what's your thoughts on this?
For the life of me, I can't see how we could proceed with a plan change if a 2-month delay means that it can't be implemented for next year. That means we would take the risk of spending $250,000 or whatever the number is for 1 year's potential benefit, but run the risk of a challenge anyway from one of the parties opposed to it. You might think about doing it if you could gain 2 years. You could not possibly think about it if you can only gain 1. So the procedural motion to delay further discussion upon this by 2 months is completely pointless, in my view. So I can't possibly support it.
Neil, have you got a thought?
Well, Mr Chair, potentially in Councillor Bevan's court in this little point and not proceeding now, if in fact it means that we're compromised anyway, in terms of the responses from those that feel that they haven't had an opportunity. Everyone at least has had the equal opportunity. Everyone's on the same page, and we've got a substantial response, even given the short time frame by a number of parties. I'm surprised that there's a lack of understanding and appreciation by those that feel as though they've missed out. I think we're ready to go and make a decision.
Fenton?
I support Tamatea in this. We've had a genuine call for a deferral so some more people can get together. I don't have an issue with it. I think it's going to be tight to get it done anyway. And 2 more months, I get the feeling it's going to fail, the deferral.
Tom, you've already spoken. Do you speak again? You've already spoken.
I've already spoken. I'm ready to vote, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah. I'm just trying to get everyone's views here, Tom. Okay, well...
I just asked a question. I didn't express a point of view. Thank you, Chair. The whole process, especially the paper that was presented at the last regional planning, this last committee meeting in December, was around this whole concept of fast fail, right? So we put the work, we asked the people, the stakeholders, what their thoughts were in a very short, squashed time frame. A number of the submitters commented about how short the time frame was they had to respond to this particular process. And we've got some answers. I don't see any reason why we should be deferring.
Thank you. David, you want to wind us up?
Thank you. I can do the maths. It's just really important to our community that this isn't scratched today.
Okay, so we have a motion on the table that we defer this paper till really the 17th of March to give the community a little bit more time.
17th of April.
April. So all those in favour?
Aye.
Against?
No.
Neil, what do you do? I think I need a count.
Division, please.
Division. All those in favour?
Aye.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Behind you.
Tora.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And yourself? No, I didn't say. I'm not voting. 8-4. All those opposed? You're abstaining.
Don't need to vote. It's gone.
Come on.
All right, vote against. It's done.
Okay, it has failed. We're back to the substandard paper, which is before us. And I don't know whether we need to go. Tom, what do you want to talk about?
Could just make the observation that, if I might, because we're going to discussion later, this is one of those rules which I thought procedural should be just simply 50-50. Just as an observation of the thing. A standing order is required to be 80%, and I've argued before that the 80% rule for everything, it places an unjust and needless burden on this committee. And procedural motions, I would have thought it could simply be 50-50. I think people should reflect on that.
What if it was 50-50? How many voted against?
It would have succeeded.
It would have succeeded. Well, Tana Te Whenua voted for it and got themselves to blame for the 80% rule, so sometimes it doesn't work for you.
Well, it was agreed and adopted by council.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah, just make
And, yeah. So it's failed as a result of that ridiculous rule. Okay.
Can I make a comment?
No, you can't. Moved on to the paper. You can make a comment in the paper.
Express his opinion. I'm entitled one.
Well, I'm the chair. Okay, we're going to move on to the substantive paper.
If I could just briefly,
Yeah.
so the two points I didn't want to hide behind in the paper were the matter that we just discussed in terms of the forest and bird position. I think it was important to articulate that, and I think it was important to articulate that for the purposes of the task force. And look, I'm actually not going to go through this now. This presentation. I'm happy to share it. It's just some words around this. More important to just to acknowledge that forest and birds frustrations are with us, Hawke's Bay Regional Council, and not the community or the task force. And so I think when the task force does reconvene, I just think that's an important note an important thing to remember. It's not, I mean, the Forest and Bird are an active and willing participant of that forum, and their criticisms and potentially their holding position on this is really more around the issues they have with regional councils and management of it. So I just think it's important to own that. The second point I want to raise...
Chair, you've commented on the Forest and Birds frustration. Why are they frustrated? What's their problem? I mean, I'm quite frustrated with Forest and Bird, but
so the terms of reference of the Tukituki Task Force, they do contain provisions that the Tukituki Task Force wasn't a policy advocacy group. And there's a feeling that what effectively the representations that came were a policy advocacy position. So they feel that maybe in hindsight it wasn't the representation from the task force wasn't appropriate. Now the counter argument is that it was just a view from the community to say that if we need to do this piece of work, we need this minor change to happen. So again, I don't think there's necessarily a clear answer on that. Terms of reference also contain provisions similar to provisions we had in the tank plan change, which gave people an opportunity to link back to their organisations to ratify any decisions that were taken at a meeting. And so the feedback has been, and it was I'm pretty sure it was in the paper on the 12th, that Forest and Bird weren't afforded that opportunity to refer to either their local or national branch, and this was a big part of the discussion we had with their national branch.
The reality is they're putting up a big smoke screen. What they have is the Kremlin coming in from Wellington, overriding them, and now they're trying to fudge, so let's call it what it is.
Chair, I would disagree with that statement. It's not only the national office that was upset by that, it was also the local branch of the Forest and Bird. So to turn around and say that it's the Kremlin coming in, I think is inappropriate.
True, though.
Are we going to have subcommittee meetings on this? Can we just have a report? Let the person go through and let's just hear the thing.
Just saying.
Just saying. Look, we've got to be out of here for lunch shortly. And, we have got a big meeting this afternoon. We've spent half an hour deciding we're going to deal with this report, which should have been done in 30 seconds. If that's the speed at which we're making decisions, then we're in trouble.
No. Just settle down. Get on to it. You can go and...
It's frustrating listening to this as I'm working.
I figured that was it. I was going to say it, but Tom,
just one more point.
Tom, got
one more point to make is that look, through the feedback, and we've had it direct from some parties, a concern as to why the feedback that went out was for 2 summers, being the 1920 and the 2021 years, the net effect is that when staff had to consider the request from the task force, the request from the task force did mirror this around or anchor this to 2 specific dates. The request from the task force also made the request subject to notification of tranche 2. In the general discussion, I think this committee decided it wasn't going to bother about the tranche 2 part of it and gave us the direction to go and, I think, scope and initiate a plan change. Part of that scoping exercise was effectively, well, what is going to meet the objectives? Staff are of the view that effectively you need at least 2 years to meet the objectives, which was a deferral that would give the community time. And so that on that basis that we went out with a 2-year window, 2 years, 2 summers hence. There's been some criticism of that. There's some people who don't think that's correct. In any event, our advice is definitely that if this is just a 1-year deal, then we don't think you'll meet your objectives. If it's a 2-year deal, you might.
Okay, questions on the paper?
Thank you, Chair. Just to follow up from that little discussion you had about the years that were in there, that suggests to me that our instruction in terms of the wording of the motion that we passed last committee meeting was implicit, not explicit, because I understood that it was certainly around just the 2018, 1920 years that deferral was for. And I have to admit, I was one that was also surprised to receive one to say it was a further year out. Without any it tied it in, the letter that went out said this was based on the request from the with the task force, and yet gave no explanation as to why the dates differed between one and the other. So that's a lesson for me. You would say I need to ensure or put in that so that you're aware that instructions to you are explicit rather than implicit. Would that be fair to say?
I agree.
Because the task force hasn't had time to debate that extra year either, Paul.
Could I ask a question, Mr. Chair?
Yes, certainly, you can.
Yeah. Is this task force dominated by the people who own the bulk of the water? I understand down your way, 5 people own 60% of the water.
650.
Nobody owns it.
No.
Not
No,
dominated.
the task force is made up by mayoral representatives, and there's a selection of forest and bird, fish and game. DOC have been invited every time. They haven't been able to attend yet, but they send apologies. There are water users, tai whenua, landowners. Have I covered everyone off, Tom?
Yes, well,
Forest
while I
and bird.
did support the motion, I believe that needs to bring the whole thing to an end, because this procrastination on these matters, robbing the Ngāti Paraweira people of money that could be spent on the Moakawera. We've been waiting 5 years for some money to come our way, and everything seems to be spent around this Headatanga area. Waira River gets nothing, Waikaramona gets nothing. So, yeah, you've got to, we come to this table to make decisions, and it's up to people to go back and sort their stuff out, so it's not incumbent on us to procrastinate.
Oh, we'll defer on that.
That was a long question, Tom.
So,
Pause, Tom, coming through. You've got a question, Tom, have you?
I do.
And then back to you, Jenny.
While this proposal is wrapped with the romance of a community task force, let's be clear where it's coming from. Can somebody on the staff tell me how many surface water consent holders are affected by the low flow limit?
I'm reaching into my memory banks, but I think it's no less than 50.
Yes, it's just over 50.
It's 39, okay? 48 surface, I'm sitting here with the Aqualink report, which is the fundamental document that looked into what are the impacts of this and who's affected and so forth.
Direct
So
and
we
indirect
effectively have 48 surface water consent holders representing, in reducing down to 39 property owners. That's the group that wants the delay, okay? That's the group that wants the delay. Let's not, get overly dramatic here about broad community, blah, blah, blah. And I wonder how many Maori are employed by those 39 consent holders. 100? 10? 1? Does anybody know? Because we're going to hear a refrain here that, the community is going to be brought to its knees if these 38 consent holders have to change their farming practices. This plan change was about changing practices. That's what it was about. And the first time 38 consent holders squeal, we're running down the road squealing with them. That's what this is all about. It's pretty simple. The people who are opposed to making this change sat through months of evidentiary hearings, making the case as to what kind of protections this catchment needed. And a board of inquiry, like it or not, came up with its reasoned assessment of things like contamination flows, et cetera, and set some rules in front of us. And people knew this from, 2013, basically, 15 by the time it was promulgated. So we have some real slow learners, it appears.
Tom, do you want any more questions? You want to
there is a question. There was a question there. There was a question, and it was
how many Māoris are employed?
Inaccurately answered. So I'm correcting the inaccurate answer.
Okay.
So
It's a rhetorical question.
So it's this issue should not be about grandfathering existing practices of a handful of users in place. It is meant to challenge those uses. Ample forewarning has been given in the processing of this, and to suspect that the people who invested as much energy as they did in getting this outcome are going to, by next April or a year from April or 5 years from April, roll over and forget about it is crazy. These people clobbered us in the courts.
Have you got a question? Get into the question, Tom.
Does anybody think Forest and Bird will not litigate this matter? Does anybody feel that they will not litigate the matter? That's a question.
He's answering my question.
Could I'd like to respond to actually one of his questions.
No, we'll keep it until there's going to be lots of response. Well, we can just keep it down to questions. Debbie, you got a question? And then we're going to have a vital debate.
Sorry, Chair, Tom's question hasn't been answered, which is, does anybody think that Forest and Bird will not take legal action on this issue?
Chairman, could I...
It's supposition, really.
Chairman, could I just make a suggestion for you here?
No, you don't need. I don't need a suggestion. I'm going to take Debbie's question.
All right, I won't be helpful then.
You can go back to your work, Debbie. Let's keep it to questions. We're going to have a vigorous debate here. But can we have your question, please?
Tom, in order for a transition plan to come about that is fair and reasonable for the communty, would you be suggesting a standard or a streamlined path, which is the likely one to be most successful?
Point of order, Chair.
Point of order?
Yep. That's an invalid question because it's not a question to the Chair, it's a question to a committee member. You're not allowed to do that. It should be a question directed to the Chair.
No, it's Tom. This Tom.
This Tom, yeah. It's Tom. It's two Toms.
It's still subject to you. It's the Chair.
Oh.
He gets to answer on your behalf.
Are you going to be difficult now, Councillor Parker?
No,
Tom, would you ask that on...
Sorry, Chair, I didn't hear the question.
That's because you were working.
I wasn't.
Tom, will you just cover the question briefly and the answer?
I believe the question I was asked is that if we're mindful to proceed with this plan change, which planning pathway would we follow in terms of a... and obviously the streamlined planning pathway is attractive in that regard because it is designed to be, fast. It is quite untested, and so I believe Hastings District Council did the first one recently. Again, but it comes down. So if everyone lined up behind this, or substantially lined up behind this, then that would probably be the pathway.
Now, are there any more questions? Jenny, you've got a question.
Well, I want to respond to the question that Tom posed about how many Māori work in those 39 resource consent
I think that's fair enough. You can answer that.
Okay, so I was going to answer that. Medallion Meats hires 120 people, for which 65% of them are Māori. And so it's not all about growers. And the other thing is that Central Hawke's Bay has experienced this through not getting a resource, where 600 staff were dismissed from Bird and Matthews for a resource consent process. So granted, there is Māori working in that area, and there are scattered Māori working on farm lots. But the question to ask about how many Māori are working on those farm lots is versus how many do they hire in their entirety. But Medallion Meats is a classic example of a large employer where there is a high priority of Māori.
Thank you, Jenny, for that answer. Peter, you've got a question.
Yeah, I have got a question. You outlined just before, through you, Chair, to Tom, so that I don't get interrupted. You outlined that the preference would be for the streamlined process. Do we what level of support for this plan change would we need to demonstrate before the Crown would be prepared to do this? Taking into account the level of opposition that we've seen through the process to date.
Look, I'm not sure I can answer that question directly. I'm going to look to perhaps Gavin or Dale if they got any particular view on that.
From exchanges that I've had with some of my colleagues around the country, this streamlined planning pathway is something that the previous government came up with. And indications are that the current Minister for the Environment is not a fan of the streamlined planning pathway. So through his inbox alone, the hurdle would be a very, very high bar to clear, just to get that green light to follow that pathway, that streamlined pathway. Whether that requires lots of party support, partisan support, to go to the Minister, I'm not so sure. But the Minister will be very interested, I suspect, in making sure that a lot of pre-application engagement amongst the community has occurred.
Thank you, Gavin. Now, Toro, you've got a question you'd like to ask the chair of the task force.
Yes. What strategy does your task force have in terms of wiser use of water over the next 20 years?
Debbie, the question is to you as chair of the task force.
Oh, sorry, I'll repeat that. Someone else was asking me a question too.
What strategy does your task force have in terms of wiser water use over the next 20 years, given we're dealing with problems, but the problem of water allocation, but we don't hear much coming back in terms of what solutions you might have?
Okay, and that's a really...
Like I was down in your area last week, and I visited one of the farm, or a couple of the farms that are growing hemp. Now, hemp doesn't require water.
No.
Avocados don't require water. Kumaras don't really require water. So there are lots of changes that could be made to the agricultural businesses that don't require water. So I'm just wondering, what thought have you guys
That's a
put
great
into that?
question. So the task force has been reported back. We've had 3 meetings so far, but there is a water conservation plan that the surface water users have put in place. So they've had training days at the Waipark Golf Club with the surface water users, a number of meetings outside of the task force, and they're reporting back to their progress with us. So we are seeing a plan, and backed by that, the community attempting to transition. We've got the new science programs that are in our paper here as well that are looking at the scanning of the region, the aquifer, and the water modelling. So there's a lot going on, and there's a lot that we don't know just at this point in time.
Just an additional question. With the Provincial Growth Fund, have you applied for some assistance to get some professional advice on what the region should be doing?
Well, it's this
your council in your
Good answer, no.
It's the
you're on
Hawke's
the
Bay
council, aren't you?
on this Wicker Council.
No, you're on the Waipa Grove.
No.
Okay.
No, and that task force is actually run by the Hawke's Bay Regional Council.
Okay, are there any more questions, or one more question?
Question.
You'll have time.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And this question is to the chair of the task force. Debbie, you spoke about you've got a conservation plan in place. Are you able to circulate a copy of that? It would certainly give me a lot more confidence moving forward as to what's going on.
I'm sure that they'll be more than happy to.
Yep, thank you.
Any more questions? Otherwise, Debbie, do we have the mover? You're moving. Alan Singler, the floor is yours, Debbie.
I'll move recommendation.
What the resolution is? I move what?
Oh, God, that's a good point.
I move. That's not good enough. I'm against I move.
I knew you were going to be difficult.
No, I'm being helpful.
Yeah, I'll move recommendations 1 and 2 and 2.3.
Hang on.
And
what page we on? I got to move it all.
And with the option standard or streamlined, I'm going to leave that standard or streamlined, not one or the other, because it may be that the staff can choose which one is best as this evolves.
Can you just give me that page, do what they're all on? Because I've lost
Page 14.
Page 14.
14. I've got all those other ones.
Chair, can I
Moved 1, 2,
2.1 and 2.3?
Yeah.
Is that right, Debbie?
Yes.
Yeah. Can I suggest, Chair, that you take 2.3 separately?
Well, it's no. 2. No, she can do that. 2. No, it's either or. So 2.1 and 2.3.
You need to say yes to that request, Mr Chair.
So, no, I said no to Paul.
No, you need to say yes.
Yes to Debbie.
No, just take the 2.3 separately, that's all.
He's not the mover.
Why?
Because he wants to vote. You might want to vote one way on the rest and another way on the.
You mean to vote that it's not an insignificant decision?
Did I have a seconder, Chair? Because if I did, I'd quite like to
Yeah, I'll
speak.
second it.
Number one is just accepting the report.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
And number two is saying that that's not a significant decision.
So we can all collegially accept the report.
Yeah, I think we can all collegially do that.
There you go.
It's been moved and second, Mr Chairman.
Yes, no,
and
I
that's
get
how it
that.
should
I
stand.
get that. We're moving one, receiving the port, and we're moving 2.1 and 2.3.
That's right.
Of this.
Point of order, Chair.
Yes.
The mover has said that she does not wish to make a choice between standard or streamlined. Now, the problem with that is, a technical problem, who makes the decision as to whether it's standard or streamlined? I think it is, the decision either has to be make one or nominate someone to make the decision for standard or streamlined. It's not a decision.
Chair, can I suggest on that
I need some help with my difficult counsellor here.
if the motion is passed, that we come back and provide the committee with some further advice on which of the planning tracks to follow. Based on Mr Ide's comments, I think there's more work to do to talk to Crown officials around the appropriateness of the streamlined track. So we would be happy for it to, with the wording to remain as is. Obviously, select one option, just drop out of the formal resolution, so it's or, and you could add on to that and request that staff report back on the preferred planning track.
That's a better motion.
Okay, let's just add that in. So, Debbie was about to speak. Just let's be very clear. This is on the either and alls. This is that we carry on with this plan change. Okay, Debbie, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Chair. This, the Central Hawke's Bay community has come and made a passionate plea to give some time for a transition for this plan change, and it was very gratefully acknowledged and accepted by this committee in December. So in order to progress this, we've come back with, a slight hurdle, and my earlier attempt to defer is because I'd like to think that we give every possible opportunity to be bringing everybody on board with this plan change, including the opposition, and have the opportunity to have a chat. So I really look forward to hearing back from the National Office of Forest and Bird, and I'll do anything to help make it work. So look, thank you for your indulgence today, and this isn't about anything except giving a community a fair and reasonable time to transition, and the sooner it happens, the better.
Alan.
Yes, Mr Chairman, I think it's important that we progress down this path because by accident, and it's purely that, we've ended up with Plan Change 6, which essentially is dysfunctional and largely disadvantages a major catchment and a major part of our region. And can I say in advance that that talking about the number of owners of water consents is irrelevant. Those people are doing what they're legally entitled to do. And the task force itself, as has been described, has very broad makeup, and it should be given credence and listened to, and in turn, non-government organisations based in Wellington, whether they be carpetbaggers or the Kremlin, deserve courtesy, but not much more than that.
Thank you, Alan.
That is so rude.
Other speakers? Tom, and then you, Paul.
What a relative handful of irrigators are doing with water in Central Hawke's Bay is wreaking havoc on any sense of water equity in that region, and the community has to face up to that fact. And it has to face up to the fact that whereas Councillor Dick clearly wasn't paying attention, the people involved in the process were instructed at any number of occasions and in the final report and every step along the way that the provisions of Plan Change 6 designed to clean up the Tukituki River were going to stand and apply whether or not a dam was constructed. Whether or not. You have to be blind, or deaf to not understand that that was the intention of the Board of Inquiry. So now we have a lot of crocodile tears over the outcome that some people still can't get over. But that's the fundamental issue here. The plan change is all about changing practices that need to be changed so as the Maori of the water can be protected, which I would think would be the objective of most of the people sitting around the table here, but apparently not. At this point, we just need to draw a line and consider what the precedent involved here is. We go through an enormously elaborate and litigated process to establish a plan change. We have a user group in the community object to the outcome, and so whatever, 4 years later now, we decide, oh geez, we made a mistake. We need to redo the whole thing. Are we going to do that on every plan change that we pass around here? Give it, let's give it a three-year hiatus and then wait for, a malcontent group to come along and say, now we got it all wrong. Let's delay it. Let's postpone the imposition of the low flow limits, or let's do whatever. As Maury Black indicated in his submission, and from my standpoint, Maury Black knows more about water issues than just about anybody, certainly anybody in this room, pointing out that you change one portion of this, you delay these low flow limits, you have a ripple effect on whether or not the water quality limits can effectively be met or not, et cetera, et cetera. So this, if you open this up, you are opening up a sustained process here of need to reacquire, reestablish evidence, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It is not going to be a simple plan change. There's no such thing as a simple plan change in this matter. It's going to be a terribly complex thing, and it will be legally challenged. It will be. So we can decide whether we want to make this decision on the substance of the issues, which obviously I feel the substance says this is a no-brainer, don't do it. Or we can decide on the pure politics of it, which is, do we want to spend $250,000, which we have not budgeted in the regional council anywhere, to prepare ourselves for litigation. That's effectively what we'd be doing. We'd be spending $250,000 to prepare ourselves for litigation, which will add more dollars to the process. And why would we be doing that? We'd be doing that because a handful of irrigators don't want to get with the program.
Thank you, Tom. Paul?
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, I'd just like to respond to Councillor Dick's comments about forest and bird being carpetbaggers and the like. To be honest, the exact same acquisition could be made against Federated Farmers because they too are a Wellington-led organisation. So we should be very careful about what we say in that respect. I have not much further to add to Councillor Belford's comments, which agree mostly with my own. But I would just like to point out in our minutes that we just approved, there's a bullet point that says, in response to concerns about the resourcing implications of a short-term deferral of minimum flow changes, plan change, staff advised that a fast-fail approach would be taken, i.e. if in the early stages of consultation staff encounter significant opposition or objection to the deferral, then the RPC would be briefed and further guidance sought on whether to continue, which is exactly what they've done. They've brought the submissions back to us and made a recommendation based on that, which was not to continue or proceed with this particular plan change. So I'm backing the staff on this one. I think it would be challenging and difficult for us to get this through in any reasonable sort of time frame, so that it actually is of some worth to the community down in Central Hawke's Bay. I also, the big thing about not only is it going to cost a certain amount of dollars, $250,000 has been bandied around, but whatever, it's also that resource is coming out of somewhere else. And as Co-Chair Tyro Walker has pointed out, to my mind, that's likely to come out of Mohaka or Wairoa or Northern Hawke's Bay. So I think that they've been waiting long enough to get something done. And I also recognise, my point to Tom is that I need to personally, I've learned a lesson here that I need to be more, when there is a motion put to staff, I need to make sure that it's explicit so you have very clear instructions on how to proceed. Thank you.
Thank you, Jenny.
Kia ora koutou. Ngā mihi o te tauhou. Happy New Year, even though we're bound into March. I don't actually disagree with anything that Tom or Paul have said. However, the process of first in, first serve actually exacerbates the whole situation. So we have no control regulatory on first in, first serve. So there's no measurements or no controls over the 39 property owners once they get their ticket to be able to use water, which to me suffocates opportunities for innovation in this regulatory framework. So that's a frustration to me, because no matter what you do, if we don't go ahead, those big users like the Bell Group will be able to sustain any issues and draw it out. They've got an election, so they can draw it out even longer. So they'll be the last people standing, and their small water users will be gone. So and the Tuki is still in the state it's in. So I suppose I'm for this motion to try and do something different, because the status quo doesn't do anything different at all. In fact, it exacerbates issues. So I do agree with you, Tom, about, we're looking after these users. I do remember the last meeting we had, you said we're bending over backwards for them, but as a Māori, representing Māori views and interests, we actually bend over backwards every day we come to these meetings. So the advantage that we have by supporting the task force is that we get to practice kaitiakitanga not remotely, but at the table. So that's why I'm strongly supporting the task force's views, because before this, Māori were not at the table. And more importantly than that, the Māori that live in those rivers, play and live beside those rivers and watch it every day, and who've never been heard. They've gone to every meeting religiously over the 30, 40 years, and no one hears them. So this is an opportunity to do something different. I agree with you on all the outcomes of the water users, but irrespective of whether it goes through a head or not, the big ones that should share their water are still going to be standing while the councillors change and the election will change in representation. So that's why I'm actually supporting the community to try and do something different, to look at something different. It is with the hope that there would be an opportunity to facilitate those discussions further at a Central Hawke's Bay level, a local level, on how we could work within the current framework without another plan change, actually. Because I do agree with the staff, it's in black and white. It's going to be a hard task on a good day. So, but I'm voting and supporting Deb's motion, because we need to change something. And my whānau need to be at the table. That's my job, is to get them at the table. And there's been no other offer, actually, for that opportunity. So that's why I'll be voting for it. So I don't disagree with any of the councillors, kōrero. I think I'd like to view it, I view it as an opportunity to do something different, no matter how challenging. Kia ora.
Thank you, Jenny. Peter?
Thanks, Chair. So in moving this motion, the mover said that since December there were some slight hurdles. I've got a slightly different view. I think that the hurdles are such that they've become deal breakers for me in proceeding with this proposed plan change. And I don't want to iterate the points that Paul and Tom have made, but we've heard from Gavin to say that the fast track process is highly likely to not be allowed to be used, which means that there will be delays a lot, because a longer process is going to have to be adopted. And all I can see is a lot of money being spent for a highly marginal extra benefit. There's highly likely to be a challenge. The best case scenario is that we might gain 1 year. We might gain 1 year. And for the expenditure involved, I just, as a responsible committee, I just don't see how we could make that decision. The council's got limited resources to do these things, and it's inevitable that this is going to mean also a delay in the Mohaka plan change, which of course is close to Toro's heart, and I just can't countenance going ahead and doing this, so I have to oppose this motion.
Any other speakers? Rick? Oh, and then back to Neil.
Well, firstly, I want to register my concern at the way in which organisations are described. I think we should be debating the issues here, not adversely characterising the individuals and how we view them. I think it's unhelpful. The starting point for me is that this is an issue which has been known for a long, long, long time. That's why this council started out on looking at building a dam. I just make the point that it would be a foolish strategy to rely on simply one outcome, a plan A. And those who built their farm plans and did their organisation around the Ruataniwha Dam being successful without thinking about what the alternatives were derelict in their duty. It was never a certainty, and it's proved to be the case. So it's gone. The second point is that we went through all of these issues, hearings, commissions, etc., and it was agreed, set down, that the interests of the river must come first. The minimum flow was to be raised, because we have known, this council has been known for decades, the minimum flow was less than desirable. Knew that the moment the resource consent was given for the irrigators to suck more water out of the Ruataniwha. The then chairman of the regional council told me this is unsustainable. This is well over a decade ago. This is a problem we've all known for a long time. If we haven't seen it, we haven't been looking. The third point I'd make is we have had presentations made to this council about how important the issue is, how urgent it is, and how focused people are going to be on it, and we've been asked to give them some time. Well, I come here today and find that one of the key elements in this hasn't had time to have a think about it, needs more time to think. I find that personally unpersuasive. If it was of vital importance and critical to me, I would have been on top of this, no matter whether it's New Year's Day, Christmas Day, whatever, it would have been done. The fourth element to me is that we discussed this and we said, if we strike significant headwind, given the limited scope of this, it's not worth it. And we've been clearly told today we're going to have some pretty stiff opposition. And with regard to the opposition, do I think they've got a point? Yes, I do. for those who are going to go this, who are going to go to court, I ask myself, which side of the argument would I prefer to be on? If I was to be the litigating lawyer, which has been the easiest case to argue? And I have to say, Forest and Bird and Ngāti Kahungunu Iwi Incorporated have got the cards in their hand, without a doubt. What we're doing here is a bodgy process. For what? I just think this is going to offer us in the long term more grief than we're ever going to get out of it. I cannot see a worthwhile outcome on this, and no one has been able to persuade me by logic that there is value in this. What we've had is a lot of emotion. I get that. A lot of tension and angst, I get that. But the reality is, the reality moves on. The sun comes up tomorrow, come up the day after as well. We have to deal with that. And at the fundamental of this, which I put slightly differently than Tom, is that the key here is the health of the river. What can we justify continuing to have that river with less flows than what the Commission said was a mandatory requirement? So I wanted someone here to say, this justifies us sucking the river dry for one more summer.
Thank you, Rick. Neil?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I probably land in the same position as a number of my colleagues, but for different reasons. And I find myself in significant agreement with Jenny Nelson in some of her comments. When I look at the outcome that is inevitable here, I see, just as Councillor Barker has commented, that the winds are against success of implementing this plan change. We will spend the money, sink into the mire, and not achieve the result that's out there. And therefore, I'm not prepared in the inevitable outcome that's there to support proceeding with this potential plan change. Having said that, I find myself in disagreement with other comments that have been made about the efficacy of Plan Change 6 minimum flows anyway. If you think they are the silver bullet, they are not. If you think you're going to achieve the outcomes for the health of the river by simply implementing current Plan Change 6 minimum flows, you are deluded. That is not going to happen. There needs to be a major and significant shift in a whole range of approaches, and one of the things that attracted me to the task force coming into being is, in fact, that is the genesis of the change that needs to take place. And as Jenny said, the opportunity for that community to get around the table, potentially for the first time because the stakes were so high, is important. So in not supporting the current the proposal, I would hope that we can sustain and grow the task force to, instead of spending $250,000 going down a consultation process, look at ways of encouraging that community and those users in the catchment to make the changes that are needed. I'd prefer to spend the dollars there if in fact they're available. So, Mr. Chair, I can't support the resolution, but I can certainly support the notion that community action at that level is needed, rather than being imposed. And I go back to it. The local Forest and Bird group supported some sort of accommodation and compromise. The reality is they were overridden by those that don't have kaitiaki over the local environment. So I don't support their position either for that reason. So, Mr. Chair, they are the reasons I can't support this resolution.
Thank you, Neil. My old mum would describe it as having your cake and eat it. Is that?
Well, it's a little bit like that.
Fenton, do you?
Oh, just quickly, Chair. I support the task force. I think, the rate of change that's required for land use down there is not going to happen in 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. You can't just turn around and plant hemp everywhere and say everything in the garden's rosy, as one example. And And I actually support the stance that the chairman's task force or the mayoral task force or the mayoral group have taken about water security being the big issue in Hawke's Bay. And it's huge. It is huge. I mean, whether it's municipal in Central Hawke's Bay, whether it's Medallion Meats, those guys can't just change direction in a very short period of time. So reluctantly, I'm going to bring this to a head and remove the quorum, and we'll have our deferral, and we'll talk about it next meeting. Bring me when it's time to come back in.
It's time to come back in, Fenton.
I don't know, can he do that?
Yep, you can.
Wow.
Okay, well, does that bring it? I didn't get a chance to have my say, but I will have my say anyway, actually. Pause. We haven't got a quorum, but I do want my say. Rick, will you just have some decorum here? Thank you.
I thought the meetings... Do you have a quorum?
No, I just want to have my say. We haven't got a quorum, but I'm the only one. So Mike Mo's demanding me as well. Everyone knows that I was a big advocate for giving Central Hawke's Bay a little bit of extra time to sort this out and work through some of the difficulties of Plan Change 6. I was reluctant, but I thought we owed them that. But I read this paper, I've thought about it, and I'm a little bit like with Paul too. I thought it was 2 years. Well, it ended up being 3. That was a little bit confusing to me. But the pragmatic position follows Peter's wonderful dissertation and half of Neil's. And that is, this is a fool's errand now. If you were in business, which many of you around this table have been in, you would never support this. It's not going to happen. And you are going to spend $250,000, forget the $250,000, probably more like half or $750,000, fighting this in the high courts of this land, and you're probably going to end up losing. That's the problem here. So from my perspective now, even though I still would like to give them a bit of time, I can't. When I read those various letters, I was a bit overwhelmed with how many people from Central Hawke's Bay didn't want this. I was really interested in Naio's comment and the Kahanunu one, and I do agree with Tom on Maury Black. Maury has spent hours looking at these, and he's a very talented man. And we had more submissions against than for, which really did surprise me. So just on that alone did sway me. But the biggest issue that sways me on this issue is the pragmatic decision, which difficult as it may be, I just couldn't support this. But anyway, we don't have a quorum, so I'm speaking to...
into thin air.
So... Tend. So I guess we're going to redebate this, and when are we going to redebate this?
2 months starts.
Chairman, I think it is really incumbent on the 2 co-chairs of this committee to go have a chat with Councillor Wilson. If this is the way we're going to
conduct business, yeah.
If this is the way we're going to conduct governance here, I will absent myself from every future meeting.
I think he's going back to Warrawong.
Committee. And so, a clever move, yeah. Good governance, bullshit.
Well, you can argue that either way, Tom.
Well, I'm arguing it my way.
For today. Let me tell you this. The abolition of slavery was achieved by exactly the same tactic in reverse.
It was, actually.
Make no mistake about that. That was superb governance and superb leadership.
All I'm saying is that...
Just on the wrong end of the argument this time, Tom, that's all.
All I'm saying is that this action opens a gigantic can of worms.
Well, it does.
And for the co-chairs to simply accept it, I think is a really big made a mistake. And this is an issue that I suspect will be explored in great gruesome detail in the workshop.
Oh, absolutely, Tom. I agree with that. But you know, I talked about pragmatic. I am not. Do you think Fenton is seriously going to come back in if I go and have a serious word with him about governance?
He's liable to stay up longer.
I would hope you had some sense of responsibility.
Chair, can I...
I think he does. That's why he's done it.
Chair, as the mover, can I just bring this to a close with my closing debate, even though we haven't got a quorum, and just say I'd like to acknowledge everybody who's spoken today. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
As a co-chair,
I'm going to have a little latitude now since we're out of committee.
Sorry.
Fine. James?
It's 11:30.
At the end of the day,
And then James, you're on.
It's going 11:26.
at the end of the day, only we can save ourselves. You know?
That's true.
At the end of the day, it's incumbent on the task force in Central Hawke's Bay to recognise the seriousness of the situation and to get a strategy in place and action it so that we don't have to go around in circles here again. I think the other issue is that scientists say that humans may only have 15 years left. Okay?
25.
Oh, well, it depends on which scientist you're talking to. And I don't always agree with what scientists say, but what if they're right? You know, what if they're right? So we've got to take this whole issue. The people have put their confidence in this council to actually deal with all the threatening issues, and we have to take them seriously. So, yes, we can defer this, pass it, or whatever. But at the end of the day, the responsibility still goes back to those people in that area to sort themselves out. You know?
James, before you come in, I've got one question for you. I don't know, but maybe Rick can, or if he stops typing, can help out here too.
I'm listening to you.
As the chair, do I have the ability to instruct you not to spend any more money on this for the next 2 months?
No.
Not as the chair. Well, look, the committee...
But you can tell him that this is the will of this council, and James would be well advised to be mindful of the views of the council.
Yeah, what we have failed to do is to get a instruction from the planning committee. But council, who ultimately has to control the purse strings here, could it not indicate that this is not an appropriate area of expenditure?
That's correct.
Exactly right.
For 2 months?
Yeah.
Well, forever.
So look,
Yeah.
No, because we're going to read. And what if people use that same kind of
If we don't get a quorum for the next
Yeah.
RPC meeting.
Well, what about the chair?
Reaching
then
a
we
positive
do that.
direction.
What about the chair declaring a national emergency at the southern border?
I want a wall. How do we go about that?
well, look, Thomas is pointing out that, of course, this is not currently within the work plans, so it's not a budgeted item in any event. So in the absence of a positive direction to undertake work, we won't be undertaking any more work.
Hold for 2 months.
That's current state. The issue I wanted to raise was the status of the remaining agenda for today. I think there's...
No, Fenton's going to come back in?
Well, if he comes back in, then the meeting recommences and this item recommences. So I think that...
Fenton, well, pause. Hold your horses right there. No, I'm just getting an interesting view on the world from here.
So,
If Fenton's in the room, we're quorate.
Yeah.
well, correct.
At the time, what is the standing order say?
Are we on the next
Sorry, can I just make this point that I think what that does is forces the committee at that point to either reconvene this item and continue with it, or we go back to where Debbie started with this, or some version of that, which is a deferral of this item. So if the committee, in order to undertake the rest of the business on the agenda and to bring Councillor Wilson back in, may need to agree to undertake a resolution.
Otherwise he has to stay
defer.
out.
Well, he's not prepared to come back in, so effectively he is...
He's out.
He's forcing the hand of the committee in this regard if the rest of the agenda is to be considered.
No, what he's saying to you here is that you need to walk out the door there, have a negotiation with Fenton, and the only thing you have to trade with him is the rest of the business to be undertaken on the basis that this matter is deferred. If we don't defer this matter, he stays out and the rest of the business goes.
Yeah.
So if you can cut a deal, whether we like it or not, cut a deal, well, that's the way we'll do it. If the council wants to carry on with the rest of the agenda, we'll say we'll cut the deal. If we don't, we won't.
If he's not in here, we can't pass that motion, right?
No, we can't. No.
So that matter's finished.
Yeah.
But he will come back in for the rest of the meeting. That's why I brought him back in.
No, well, the item's still live.
The item's still live.
So
Bruce needs to come
you're correct.
I don't need to cut a deal. I can say he's left the room and he's ruined our meeting for the whole day.
That's it. Once we pack up, I'm gone.
But you can agree to defer the vote on this to the end of the meeting, and then you can come back in. There's absolutely no reason why the chair can't do
Look,
that.
the chair could do that, yep.
So defer the vote on this and then he leaves.
Well, you haven't got any powers at the
Then he
moment.
leaves
You won't
before the
have
end
a
of the
quorum
meeting.
anyway.
Have a meeting.
So
Then
So
at
he
least
would
you
have to agree to
at least
come
you get
in.
your quorum for the rest of the meeting.
on that
this
basis.
issue cannot be dealt with. So bring him back in and we carry on with the meeting.
With the rest of us.
And don't mention
Oh, totally. Specifically,
There's another...
the moment Fenton left, the meeting died because you didn't have a quorum. That's it.
Yep.
Everything we're discussing here is out of order. Out of order. It's dead.
Yeah, no, I'm not going to be blackmailed by him. This meeting is over.
Exactly right.
This RPC meeting is over. No, Peter, we're not. We're not having councillors walk out of meetings just because, and using these sort of mechanisms, despite what Abe Lincoln did, and trying to blackmail us by saying we can do something different.
I wanted to ask a procedural question. What are the powers of the council in relation to this versus the RPC? That's what I'd like to understand.
Well, there's no recommendation, and this is one of the unresolved issues around the RPC Act is what is the powers of the council in the absence of a positive or negative recommendation from the RPC.
All right, so given that we haven't got anything from the RPC, is it possible at the next council meeting that the council could make a decision to either proceed or not?
Yeah.
With this matter?
Do you mind if I have a crack at that?
Sure.
I would say that given that this is a plan change, and a recommendation of a plan change and a work program around a plan change, without pulling the Act and the terms of reference out right now, and I've got them handy, my suggestion is this is a matter for the RPC to make a recommendation. This is not an ancillary matter or related to it.
But can the RPC compel an expenditure?
No,
They can make a recommendation, but I don't believe.
what we
believe
can do,
council
Tom,
would pick
is
it up.
we can say, in the meantime, we are not going to have any more expenditure on this, and I intend to follow that course until this is resolved at the next RPC meeting. So I'm telling you all now, I don't approve of that tactic, and I'm not going to go back and be blackmailed into doing something we already decided we wouldn't do. So the meeting is over. Thank you very much. Do you want to do a karakia?
I like leadership.
Yes.
Is that the wins from the North period?
That was from the south.
Went from the south.
Confirms that I'm right in law, so that's good. Not usually like right in law.
Well, but the advice I gave you was once someone leaves, it's over.
It's dead. Petty, the floor is yours. We're looking for something special from you now.
We've got to watch the changes to the...
Okay.
You have to be careful with the modifications.
The karakia that I'm going to look at, I'll do it. I'm just going to do it directly in English.
I think you should.
So we don't have to do it twice if we get the meaning. Our Father which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread and forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those that trespass against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power and the glory forever and ever. Amen. Kia ora tātou.
A very traditional karakia, I might add.
Without the rest of the